It's fair to say that most of us wind up choosing a bigger car as our families grow, but we've gone in the opposite direction, with our past two cars getting smaller and smaller as my family gets bigger and bigger, with my third baby arriving just before our Skoda Kodiaq arrived on the scene, and therefore we had to fit 3 child seats and all their stuff into a car that's more than 20 centimetres shorter than the Mazda CX-8 it replaced. Was this insane? We've had 3 months and 5,000 kilometres with the Kodiaq 132 TSI to put this choice to the test, so if you're keen to avoid buying a big SUV, keep watching. But rather than just rattling off everything we did with this car, I'll split this video into chapters, and all the time codes are here so you can skip ahead to anything you're interested in. And if you're watching this on YouTube, there's chapter markers on the timeline below to make it even easier. And as always, if you're looking for more detail, you can find a lot more in my written review on the CarsGuide site. And if you're not sure if the Kodiaq is right for you, and if you want to keep abreast of any new ones on the market, hit subscribe and the bell icon so you don't miss any of our new videos. Before we get too far in, I should warn you that since we collected this car, the Kodiaq has been updated for the 2021 model year. So this 2020 example isn't quite representative of what's available in showrooms right now. The new one gets upgraded multimedia with wireless CarPlay, but Android Auto is still corded, and it gets wireless phone charging and a handful of other tweaks to justify a $1,500 price hike. The most obvious change is new wheels that should do a much better job of hiding brake dust than the current ones. One thing that hasn't changed for 2021 is the Kodiaq's Practicality, and it still comes with a whole bunch of things that should be on all new SUVs, including the driver's door umbrella, retracting door edge protectors, front seat backrest device holders, and tiny rubbish bin. This is all brilliant stuff, and it's nuts that no other brand has caught up yet. The most important test for us though is how well our 3 child seats fit across the second row, and I'm pleased to say that our 2 0 to 4 seats fit in the outboard positions and our harness booster fit in the middle without fuss. We used the Isofix mounts in the 2 outboard positions and the top tether in the middle. And here's a pro tip, it's important to fit the middle seat first so you can get it nice and tight before it's blocked in by the other 2. As always, it pays to trial fit your own seats to be sure, but according to my tape measure, the Kodiaq has a 60mm width advantage over the CX-8 at this critical point. I was also pretty impressed to find that the base Kodiaq comes with these retractable sunshades, but in reality they don't really block that much light, which is probably in the interest of preserving driver visibility. So what we've had to do is drape a cloth over it to protect my littlest one from direct sunlight. It's not a big deal, but it's worth mentioning. The Kodiaq is a 7-seater, but having 3 child seats in the second row means you'd have to climb into the third row via the boot, which also means we'd only be able to use one of the 2 seats. It's worth noting that there's no child seat mounts back here at all, so the Kodiaq really is a 3 child seat max car. You can put small children back here when they're out of child seats though, and as you can tell, it's really only useful for adults on short trips. One other plus though is that there's curtain airbags that cover all the way to the third row, which is more than we can say for a lot of other 7-seat SUVs. The other big test for us is whether you can cram enough in the boot, and I'm sure we're not alone in carrying a porta cot, and a pram everywhere we go. And that's before you consider putting shopping or luggage on top of that. However, the reality is that the Kodiaq's squared off load area and sliding back seat meant we were able to fit just as much back here as with the Mazda. We probably lost a bit more rear visibility doing so, but for a much smaller car, it's done an excellent job. I should also mention that there's very handy underfloor storage back here, which is great for hiding things like umbrellas or first aid kits and anything else you want to hide. There's also a space saver spare like most new cars, which isn't as handy as a full-size spare, but better peace of mind than an inflation kit, which a lot of cars are starting to come with. On balance, it's all pretty good up the front too, with 2 glove boxes, one of which is hiding one of the few remaining CD players you can get in 2020. There's bottle holders in each door, but the cup holders up here were designed for Red Bull cans rather than big Aussie water bottles, and the center console bin isn't particularly big. There's just one USB-A point up the front, which we use for charging and Android Auto, and as I said before, the 2021 model gets wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless charging. The digital driver instruments are also really good and adaptable for whatever you want to see, but there's no head-up display. The only other thing I'd like to mention is that the Alcantara seat trim looks and feels really good, but I hate to think how it'd hold up to a banana smear. Our Kodiaq 132 TSI is the cheapest version you can buy, and as I said before, it's subsequently been superseded by the slightly updated 2021 model year version. It still sits beneath the top spec and sports-oriented RS, and marginally cheaper than the sports-styled Sportline versions of the Kodiaq. And if you're interested in the other two versions, you should check out Richard Berry's video on the RS and Nadal Stelio's video on the Sportline, but be mindful that both of those versions have also been updated for 2021. Aside from the features I've already mentioned and the safety stuff I'll get to in a minute, our 132 TSI has dual-zone climate control and LED lights all round, and stacks up pretty well for a European SUV with 7 seats for under $50,000. Aside from annual running changes, the Kodiaq is more or less the same as it was when it first touched down in Australia 3.5 years ago. Impressively, it's arguably just as fresh looking as the more recent Karoq and Kamiq Skoda SUVs, and looks pretty upmarket in the optional quartz grey paint on our car. The big 19-inch alloys also help, but the grey MY21 update wheels are going to be a lot easier to keep clean. Check out how much brake dust these silver ones build up after a week. At just under 4.7 metres long, the Kodiaq is also one of the shorter 7-seaters around, which could be the difference between fitting in your garage or not. The Kodiaq was right at the top of the class for safety when it first arrived in 2017, and it still ticks all the big boxes. Its maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating, according to 2017 standards, still stands, along with excellent airbag coverage with dual front and driver's knee, side airbags for the first 2 rows, and curtain airbags covering all 3 rows. Active safety includes active cruise control, city AEB up to 30 km an hour, lane assist, blind spot detection, front and rear parking sensors, rear cross traffic alert, auto parking function, and a driver fatigue monitor. The only additions we'd hope for if it were a newer model would be highway and reverse AEB, plus pedestrian detection. The 132 in 132 TSI stands for the 132 kilowatt 2-litre turbo petrol engine, which we've seen in a whole bunch of Skoda, Volkswagen and Audi products in recent years, including the Tiguan I lived with for 6 months in 2017. Same goes for the 7-speed dual clutch auto, which doesn't seem to have the same issues as earlier versions of the DSG transmission, and it's also got the same all-wheel drive system as the Tiguan, but Skoda calls it 4x4 instead of Volkswagen's 4Motion. So I was interested to see how all the above copes with the 77 kilo heavier Kodiaq, which we'll go into detail about in the driving and fuel use chapters. We've spent 5,000 kilometres trying to match the Kodiaq 132 TSI's 7.6 litre per 100 kilometre official combined fuel figure, which seems pretty ambitious for a petrol SUV that weighs 1.7 tonnes. We haven't tried too hard, mind you, as we're yet to manage a solid motorway run to give it the best chance, with our driving generally being made up of urban lugging with 3 kids on board, and trips over the Great Dividing Range with all the above plus a full boot. Across 8 tanks of fuel, we've seen a best of 9.2 and a worst of 11.1, but all 8 average out to 9.87. This isn't fantastic, but is pretty fair if you compare it to the 8.9 average we got from the Tiguan with the same mechanicals, which was 77 kilos lighter to start with, but also had to carry around 2 fewer kids. So not bad, but not great either, particularly when you consider it needs more expensive 95 RON premium unleaded. Interestingly, we managed slightly better with the seemingly less high-tech drivetrain and slightly heavier CX-8, which racked up an overall average of 9.67 on regular 91 RON unleaded, which is cheaper. The Kodiaq is covered by Skoda's 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, which is now the status quo for mainstream car brands. Service intervals are a decent 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, and you can get pre-purchase service packs to help cut the running costs. 3 years will set you back $900, or 5 years will cost $1,700, and both are significantly cheaper than what's offered for the equivalent Volkswagen models. The driver's seat of the Kodiaq is a nice place to be. All the materials feel like high quality and there's a good overall sense of refinement and comfort. I find that all the convenience features you really need are close to hand, and in my case I've always got Android Auto loaded up on the screen so it's ready to take my voice commands. All the other controls have uniform weighting and the ride comfort is really quite good despite riding on the big 19-inch wheels. Because the Kodiaq is on the smaller side and the ride and handling balance is really nicely calibrated, it tends to feel more nimble than larger 7-seaters, particularly when you're in tight parking situations like shopping car parks. It's not perfect though, with the 132 engine feeling more adequate than punchy, particularly when you've got a full load on board on the open road, but it is still a very quiet and smooth engine overall. As I found with our Tiguan, the off-idle throttle response is a bit more doughy than you might expect from a 2-litre turbo, and I presume this is due to it being calibrated more for efficiency than outright performance. But then, it's not all that efficient. This doughiness can generally be fixed by pulling the transmission selector back to S mode, which would no doubt send the efficiency further south again, but it's pretty handy to have just a flick of the wrist away. The dual clutch auto is so much better than the DSGs of old, but it still tends to be a bit more jerky on hill starts or even reversing up my driveway than a more traditional torque converter auto. Overall, it's a really nice drive, and you really can't expect too much from 132 kilowatts pulling 1.7 tonnes, and that's before you add a load on board. The Skoda Kodiaq proves that you don't have to go and buy the biggest SUV on the market at the moment you have 3 kids, and it'd be much easier to live with in congested areas than something huge like a Mazda CX-8 or even a Toyota Kluger, and even this next size down with something like a Mazda CX-8 or a Hyundai Santa Fe. It's holding up very well considering it's now been on the market for 3.5 years, and even the base 132 TSI has all the important features that any family would need without spending more on the more expensive versions. It's not the most efficient SUV going around, but it's also far from the least. It's a really good balance overall really, and the MI21 updated version is only going to be better again. And don't forget, if you're looking for more detail, you can read it all in my full review at the CarsGuide site, plus thousands of other reviews. And if you're wanting to keep abreast of all new models that arrive, make sure you hit subscribe and the bell icon to keep across all our latest videos.